What's this that Brittany sent in here?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, like, it's
That our proposal?
it's the proposal, and everything is the same except a lower
Other
amount.
than there's no substance to it.
That we don't know who's coming up.
Right, I see what you're saying.
You know, that's why you need these folks to supply you. That's why these folks are sitting here to supply us with information about the cycling corridor. You know, we can't. Okay. Okay, you ready, Sam?
Yeah, I believe we are ready.
Are you?
I'm ready. Thank you.
Okay, folks, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thanks, everybody. And I'd like a motion to, I have to make the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Silix and the Sinix peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour the connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. We'd like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Silix and the Sinix peoples, and it's home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour the connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. The land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Silix and the Sinix peoples,
Mute yourself.
the Métis and many diverse
I'm looking for it.
Aboriginal persons.
It's muted now.
We honour the connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance
Sorry.
of the environment to our strength as a community.
Oh,
He needs to mute himself.
Craig, can you mute yourself?
Just looking for it.
Okay.
Are we okay?
Okay, that's better.
Okay, sorry, we had a little bit of technical difficulties,
What else is there?
but that's life nowadays. Okay, I'd like to, are there any late items? Hearing none, I'd like to motion to adopt the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Lochtenberg. Questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Adopt the minutes of the previous meetings, the regular meeting of April the 6th and the minutes from the regular meeting of April the 6th.
I'll move.
Councillor Woodward, Councillor Page, questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And the first item on the agenda is a strata title for 908 Front Street. The applicant is requesting to stratify 908 Front Street from C1 downtown core commercial zone property to existing commercial use. The property owner has a building permit to construct an additional containing a residential unit and would like to strata title the residential and two commercial units separately.
We have Cal.
Cal? I'm sorry, you're muted, my friend.
Mr. Mayor, at this time, I'd like to recuse myself. I'm in conflict.
Thank you.
Get him back.
Now, how do we get him back?
He's muted. Cal. Cal.
Have to phone him.
Guess we need that, figure that process
I will text him.
Let's hope he's not going up to the golf course for supper, is it? Okay, very good. So there's a full report in front of us here, and we have our staff here also from planning. I don't know if you wanted to give us a little bit of background or not. If not, then there is a staff recommendation, and if council is comfortable with moving it, somebody needs to put their hand up. Moved by Councillor Lochtenberg and second by Councillor Morrison, that the Section 242 of the Strata Property Act, conversion of the property containing the previously occupied building located on lot plan NEP 5498, District Lot 95, Land District 26, 908 Front Street into three strata lots be approved. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried.
Thumbs.
Carried, thumbs up, thank you. Is there anybody gonna find Councillor Renwick now that he's,
Well,
oh, there he is. He's back. Back, thanks, okay.
Funny times.
Next item on the agenda is the EcoSociety Market Request. The 2020 farmers market season has been impacted by COVID-19 epidemic, and the EcoSociety has 4 requests for council to consider. And they're all in your package, and it's quite a lengthy one. And there's staff recommendations 1, 2, and 3.
It's like somebody to.
Councillor
Mayor?
Morrison, move.
I would like to, at this time, refer this item back to staff for further discussion with the EcoSociety as to potential other options.
Need a seconder, please? Second by Councillor Page, thank you. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thumbs up if you're in favor. Carried, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the City Hall mural. Nelson District Arts Council has requested that council allow the mural to be installed in City Hall. Council is now requested to approve or deny the use of the city-owned building for the proposed design. And thanks very much to everybody involved in this. And there's a recommendation that council, or not, it's up to council to approve the use of the east-facing wall of City Hall at 310 Ward Street for the installation of a mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by artist Tyler Taves. Moved by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Lochtenberg. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favour? Thumbs up or thumb down? Up it is, okay. Approved, thanks very much everybody. Next is the Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaws, and we've gone through these and they're up for reading here, and in front of us is, where is it? Long way down the page. There's, sorry Kevin?
My agenda not up to date?
There's one
I see,
Well, there's one before that, sorry, I
C2
beg your
zone.
pardon. So it's a C-zone final amendment for residential amendment. The owner of 920 Nelson Avenue has applied for amendment to C2 service commercial zone to increase the maximum permitted residential density from 1 dwelling per property to 3. And there's a full report from our staff, and there's a recommendation from staff also somewhere here. And the recommendations are that council rescind the resolution adopted at its March 9th, 2020 regular meeting, directing staff to schedule a public hearing relative to the zoning amendment for C2 residential amendment bylaw number 3488/2020. So we got to jump on these pretty well one apiece here. Sarah?
Council Lautenberg.
So Councillor Lochtenberg moved, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? All in favour? Thumbs up if you're in favour.
Can't see.
Okay, I got enough anyway, so Janice, we're gonna need you to put your thumb up if you're in. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Janice. And number 2, accordance with section 464 of the Local Government Act, a public hearing of the zoning amendment bylaw not be held in consideration of its
Consistent.
consistency with the official community plan.
Mover and seconder.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Morrison, second. All in favour? Thumbs up. Thanks very much, everybody. And 3, that the Corporation of the City of Nelson zoning amendment, C2 residential amendment number 3488/2020, be read a third time by title only. Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Page. All in favour? Thumbs up. Good. Thank you very much. And finally, that council finally adopt the Corporation of the City of Nelson zoning amendment C2 residential amendment bylaw number 3488/2020. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Morrison, all in favour? Thanks, everybody. Good, thank you very much. And the next one is the bylaw amendments, council resolution. On April 23rd, 2020, council adopted a number of resolutions pursuant to the city's interim economic, financial, sustainability plan in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. A number of resolutions impacting various fees, charges, and penalties that are normally enforced by the city. The resolution also impacts certain payments and deadlines. And I know you've read through these, folks, and Sarah, can we,
I have some questions.
prior to moving anything here, Janice?
Yes, because it might change what we move. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
And my mistake, I was just trying to find, I was hoping I had sent my requests to Colin, and sometimes when I'm a bit tired, I hit delete instead of send. It's the wrong button in the wrong spot. But in terms of looking at these dates, it's the dates that I'm concerned about. In terms of water and sewer, I was wondering if the CFO could tell us how many people have not actually paid their water and sewer bill, and or give me the number of how much is still owing to the city. Because I'm questioning whether or not we should extend this date to actually June 15th from what's in the document as May 15th. And then the same thing pertained to the hydro customers. I had asked, I thought, a question about how many customers are in arrears. How many customers did we have that are in a position that we should actually be disconnecting, and sort of like, what was it before COVID started? And how many more have added to that package of people that now would be also getting disconnects? Because again, I'm wondering whether or not we should be extending the date by 1 month. The reason why I want these date extensions or contemplation of them is based on if the financial impact to the city is not too great at this moment, is I don't want to come back and have staff having to come back again and again and again with these amendments to, to these policies, to these bylaws.
So can I just maybe, I think the piece that we built in was the repayment plan if people are in hardship. We brought this forward to council as part of your economic stimulus and financial stability plan. And the piece we built in to create that flexibility was these repayment plans. We just needed a place and time that now we start to work with those that have not been able to pay. We felt in both circumstances that in water and sewer, May 15th was appropriate. The CFO, when we extended it to April 15th, had called all those customers. Their staff had to find out where they were at, and that was before certainly some of these programs were rolled out by the province and feds. I think most of that money's in people's hands. So I think we're comfortable that with the repayment option over 12 months that we can deal with those exceptions. If we extend that again, then you're drawing that 12 months out another month. We're concerned that we're going to put more people in places where it's going to be hard to recover from, especially considering, definitely residential customers that, or the majority that have been hit by this, have been receiving these new funds. And if they choose not to spend that on their water and sewer or their hydro bills, and that funding runs out, then they're going to be in a real challenge to fund that. So, we really considered that as part of, when we brought that original plan forward, and that was the flex that was built into it. So I don't know, Colin, if you have any specific stats.
Yes, I do. I apologize, Council Morrison. I see that you did send me some information on that. I apologize for not getting back to you in time, but I will update a couple of things. We did run a comparative of April 22nd, 2020 with April 30th of 2019, recognizing that we haven't updated it every week and we have new bills coming out, But what we had, did see is that we were about $37,000 overdue in April 30th of 2019. Currently, or at the April 22nd, we were at 97, which is about $61,000 or $62,000 as compared to 37. So we're about 6% of our overall balance that would be in that period of being past 60 days. So again, still sort of early, and as each week goes on, the plan was to sort of look at this on a month basis as to, you know, where things are at. I know that staff have been directed and have been working with customers in particular that are seeing hardship, as the CEO had mentioned, making sure that they at least pay something so that we don't get this too far down the track. They were appreciative that the penalties have been waived, and we're glad that we would be looking at having payment options for them. And then when we talked about payment options at that point in time, that was just being able to look at what their package is now. And again, we are trying to set this date where we don't have it open-ended, that there's no penalties for a long period of time. And as much as that may be challenging for some people, the idea being that when you have a penalty in place, and those that are having hardship or having a hard time, we want to work with them and find a payment plan, but understanding that certainly there will be a certain percentage of the population that will continue to push off some of those payments because there is no due dates or no penalties being applied. So we want to sort of keep those that can pay to pay. The other risk, of course, we have is that those that end up being in a rental situation, if they don't pay and then they leave, then that certainly that cost becomes directly attributed to the landlord as well. So that's something that we've tried to keep in mind. The sewer and water, I don't have numbers for you. We did certainly see that we are higher with people that have not paid. The challenge, of course, is that with extending the deadline and then kind of extending it again, you are allowing people to go in and pay the full amount. We do have many that have already paid sort of their first quarter because that's the way that they pay. And we were hoping to send a letter out in the next little while here to our outstanding customers to say, you still have an opportunity. Council's given it you till May 15th, so that's another longer period of time. And if you haven't paid your first quarter, then you can also make that payment without any penalties. Again, the hope is that if we get to this midway in the point of the year, that getting a payment plan that works on it quarterly should allow us to work with those people that are having challenges, but not keep it open-ended for those that regularly pay quarterly, not to have any penalties. And then obviously, because this may not be top of mind, if there's no penalties, that they get themselves deeper in a hole. I don't know if that answers your question, Councilor Morrison, but certainly could try to get out some more information on, you know, who's paid in the last little while, because staff were waiting on the date here in order to start, because we knew the council had extended the date till April 15th. So now that that's changed, we have to kind of relook at the numbers and kind of see, you know, where we've landed. One of the problems that we have is that because we don't have anything to compare to, and that usually we would have sent those letters out in the first week of April, now we're in the first week of May, it's hard to tell what, you know, who is going to go quarterly normally and who is now just been waiting for the opportunity to either pay in full and take the discount, or that they now want to go on a quarterly payment plan.
So subsequent, so my only concern, I mean, it would be nice to have the numbers at some point, and maybe we can have some more numbers in a couple of weeks. It was more about the fact that part of the reason that these bylaw changes were coming forward at this time was that staff felt that we needed to get these amendments into our bylaws so that they were hard and fast, and people could see that we were actually making a commitment to the 25-point economic stability, and also for any other staff to be able to look at what our bylaws are and give the correct information. And so my concern is if we felt that we needed to extend them out, say another 30 days, you know, then potentially they're going to come back to us again. And so I was just trying to figure out if we could lessen, if we weren't going broke, if we could lessen the workload of staff having to come back to bring back a bylaw change every month as we go forward. So thank you for that, CFO.
Thanks, Councilor Morrison. Okay, so we can start with number 1, that council passed the first, second, and third reading of fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3492, 2010. We have to do these one at a time.
We do, yeah.
So, Councillor Renwick, Councillor Anderson, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. And number 2, the council finally adopt the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3492, 2020, pursuant to the powers granted to council the ministerial order number MO 83. Mover and seconder, Councillor Page, Councillor Lochtenberg, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. The council passed first and second and third reading of the Hydro Service Amendment Bylaw number 3493, 2020. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Page, all in favour? Carried, thank you. And we're down to number 4, that council finally adopt the Hydro Service Amendment Bylaw number 3493, 2020, pursuant to the powers granted to council. Did I not just read that one? No. Oh yeah, sorry, it's a different one, yeah, different number. Ministerial order number MO 83. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Lochtenberg, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. 5, that council passed the first and second and third reading of the Sanitary Sewer Regulatory Amendment number 3494, 2020. Moved by Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Lochtenberg. All in favour? Thank you. 6, that council finally adopt the Sanitary Sewer Regulatory Amendment Bylaw number 3494, 2020, pursuant to the powers granted to council by ministerial order number MO 83. Moved by Councillor Renwick, seconder Councillor Lochtenberg. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And the council passed the second and third reading of the Waterworks Regulation and Rates Amendment Bylaw number 3495. Councillor Lochtenberg and Councillor Page, all in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And number 8, the council finally adopt Waterworks Regulation and Rates Amendment Bylaw number 3495, pursuant to the powers granted to council by ministerial order number MO 83. Councillor Lochtenberg again and Councillor Morrison. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. All right. Lake Street. Land sale. A portion of Lake Street. 2018 Development Service received a road closure application jointly submitted by the owners of 502 Front Street and 509 Lake Street and 511 8th Street and 520 Front. At this time, only 502 Front is interested in moving forward, and there is a recommendation from staff along with a comprehensive package supporting the recommendation. And if somebody wishes to move it, moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Page, the council approved the permanent closure of a portion of Lake Street roadway as per attached map along the south property line of Parcel A, Lot 1, Block 62A, Plan NEP 9500, District Lot 95, Land District 26, at 502 Front Street for the potential sale to the owner of 502 Front Street, subject to the following conditions: that the land be sold on the condition that the building footprint be expanded, and that the owner be responsible to satisfaction of the city for the legal surveys, registration of the plan with the Land Titles Office, permanent closure of the roadway along the south frontage 502 Front Street. All in
Sorry,
favor?
I just got
Kevin's
one
with-
question. Just from an expedience point of view, I asked whether we would close that whole area as opposed to just that one lot and then have to survey it, another 4 or 5 times. We've gone to our staff. We wouldn't obviously we wouldn't sell that to those other property owners, but seems to me we shouldn't piecemeal this together, and I'm not sure if this resolution, where you guys ended up with this, and if this resolution reflects that.
We got it.
No, the resolution, because they're not moving forward this time, does not reflect that. However, I have been told by the surveyor, so leading up to this, because they're in a bit of a hurry. I was discussing already with the owners of Strata across the street. They went out and hired a surveyor, and that surveyor has informed me that that all 4 properties in the block are engaging him collectively to prepare the survey plans so that they're ready for the time that they'd like to go forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are looking at the bigger area.
Exactly, because of the sort of conditions that were imposed on consideration of this application at a closed meeting last summer, that the land would only be sold if their building footprint were expanded. At this time, it's just Strata at 502 Front that's willing to do that. So the others, they haven't satisfied that condition.
But we're gonna do a road closure for the larger area, and then you can subdivide those off later, right?
That's no. At the time, presently, what's before for the land disposition, only this section is going to be sold. For the road closure bylaw, that would be expected to follow. We could look at that time.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
There was no point in us having one little section of that larger piece closed. Doesn't mean we have to sell it. It'd just be not a road anymore.
For sure, yeah. And there's some complications. We'll have to look at that a bit more closely in the coming months because each individual sort of parcel that would be adjacent to each of the other 3 properties doesn't meet the minimum lot size, so we can't actually be established as a parcel yet, but
Okay.
we'll work through
So
that.
as long as it's on the radar, that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councillor Page has a question too, so just hang on for a second, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Dooley. I was bringing this back to, I think, initial discussions we had a number of months ago at this point, and why this was something of particular interest to me was that they would be doing some cheese production, or they would be expanding their operations. But I see within the discussions, or at least within the report, and maybe Sebastian, you can speak to what discussions you guys have had, that they're allocating this space, or the expansion of the building envelope, for more seating purposes at this point. Like, it seems like we've lost the food production manufacturing side that initially was put forward as the reason for wanting to do this, or is that not the case? And do we need to adjust the conditions?
That is the case. It turns out that making cheese or any other dairy products in Canada is very, very cumbersome from a regulatory perspective. And they have abandoned those plans given how difficult it is to go ahead with those plans. Correct. It is what they are looking at doing now is indeed expanding, not a seasonal patio like we'd see, on Baker Street that takes up parking spaces, but sort of permanent seating area that would be built out, which they don't currently have, and that would allow them to expand their food services and have people stay.
Okay, you okay, Councillor Page?
Yeah, I'm okay.
I meant to ask this question today, Kevin, I'm sorry, but I noticed in here you're leaving an allowance for a sidewalk and street lamps. And I was just wondering, like, in some parts of town, we're actually taking sidewalks out. And
It's in the downtown core. Our
So, okay.
standards would be sidewalk on both sides of the
Okay.
street in the
Just so that
downtown core.
somebody might ask that question, why?
Yep.
Would you? Okay, so
It was something that came out, in the last couple of years, since this has been going on for a while, with both hydro on there and for street lighting and public works as well too, that they would support the application, only if that 2-meter allowance was maintained in order to have that flexibility for the future.
yeah, thank you very much. And Councillor Anderson, you had your hand up?
You're muted.
Right now?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay, so you might lose my video as I have to go back to the document. So on part A, where it says that the land be sold on the condition that the building footprint be expanded, do we want to put a timeline on that, or do they just have to have the intention to expand at some time?
That's really up to council. I'm not sure, Alex, from your comfort level of them going ahead.
It's certainly not a bad point, as we often do for land sales. We do have some deadline on there. What I can say is that they're they've already engaged the services of an architect, and they've been working on this actually for the past couple of months. There was quite a bit of a delay on the appraisers and on this application. So they've been looking at these plans for a while, and already back in December or January, they began working with an architect. So they're quite keen on moving ahead. So it's not an excessive concern on our end, but it certainly could be a prudent thing to do as well too. If
I think
council
with
desires.
the reality of COVID-19, I think we're going to anticipate some people's plans may get delayed financially. I don't think, the only thing you could do is delay the sale, and they would pay the survey costs and not be able to purchase that land for a period of time until they, I guess we issued a building permit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can issue a building permit if they don't own the land. So we're kind of in a catch-22. I think you really have to trust the people that are coming forward. Otherwise, it gets really complicated. We have to do a road closure. We have to transfer the land, and only at that point can they get a building permit to build. So it's pretty hard to, if it was there, it's a tough one to put those type of restrictions on.
Yeah, so again, it's anecdotal at best, I know, but having spoken to them in the last few weeks, they're still quite keen on going. They're not, they're not relying on debt and loans or anything for this project. But as Mr. Cormack was saying, there's quite a bit of process to these, even though theoretically a road closure application like this could be, completed within 6 or 7 months. Typically, it ends up taking years, as this one has as well. Which is why it's quite important for them to get all of these from this motion today through to the road closure bylaw and subsequent surveying to have all of that completed as soon as possible.
Okay, any further questions? All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, onward and upward. The next item on the agenda, you probably have to stick around. Oh, Sebastian's coming up. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Active Transportation Primary Bike Route Project.
We did do A and B, right? You didn't do those.
We did all together, didn't we?
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted
Yeah, we did
to
them
be
all
sure.
together. Yeah. And city staff are presenting as the results of a community consultation for the purpose of proposed Fairview to downtown bike route. The project brief is attached to this report and summarized, and the project is as well as the community consultation piece. And thanks, great report, you folks. And you're here to give us a little bit of upfront information, Sebastian, I assume?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think
Pretty extensive.
yeah,
process.
I noticed your partner jumped ship right away. Is that a good sign or a bad one?
He's gone on his bike.
Is it a bike? Yeah.
the state. Yeah, I think I'd just like to maybe make sure that everybody's on the same page, because I know that there's a lot to these plans, and I think it's important that everybody understands what we're proposing. So I'll go through a relatively short presentation. So in terms of, I think it's important to maybe go back to the start and why are we doing this? And ultimately there's a few points there. Firstly, it's part of our official community plan, and one of the targets is to make active transportation become the largest share of local trips by 2040. So we're currently at 30%, so we've got a bit of work there to do. Of course, it's a major action item to the implementation of the active transportation plan. It serves to also improve cycling facilities on the existing bike route, which is along High Street. And then further to that, we're trying to provide connectivity between Fairview and downtown. And really, at the end of the day, we're trying to develop a preferred design based on public input, technical analysis, and also best practices. So essentially, some of the milestones, I won't go through all of them, but the review of the active transportation was conducted a little less than a year ago, and now we've gone through the process of really reaching out and trying to get some funding to start some of the primary bike route proposal. So essentially, it can be divided up in 3 sections. So we're looking at roughly a 2-kilometer section. I'd like to say it's roughly a third of the entire bike network for the primary bike network, I should specify. So the first section in blue is the High Street corridor. So basically from Vernon all the way to the Hume School, and then that is linked via the Anderson Nelson Ave intersection, and then it connects to 3rd Street, and ultimately we can see some future connection points that would eventually tie all of this together. So we'll go a bit more in details in terms of what those options are, or what the design. Essentially, when we're looking at designing some of these infrastructure, we're looking at best practices, and we're fortunate that the province of British Columbia has come out with some very in-depth guidelines for municipalities to utilize. And essentially, I've taken a few screenshots of what's included in that guideline. So there's basically 5 points: safe and stress-free. So really, it's often real or sometimes perceived safety issues, but it's important to address them even though they might be perceived. Inclusive, that's where we're talking about the mobility for all ages and abilities, so that AAA infrastructure. Context sensitive, so topography, winter cities, those are 2 things we need to think about here. Cohesive and direct, so really that's about connectivity. How are all these pieces getting linked together, and where are we starting and where are we going? And attractive and intuitive. Really, it needs to be simple and predictable and consistent throughout the city. So those are the kind of key themes that go into designing this. And as you can see on the bottom left-hand diagram, really 2 things that we look at is the traffic volumes and the traffic speed. So the higher those are, the more protection you need to offer. And the other graph just to the right of that puts numbers to that. So essentially, if we look at High Street, we're roughly, the speed limit is between 30 and 40, but if we can easily bump that down to 30, and we're currently at approximately 2,000 vehicles per day. So we're very much in that depends on context. So meaning that we're in between segregated, protected infrastructure and shared roads. But if we bring the volume down, then we can start going into the neighborhood bikeway, which is shared streets. In terms of 3rd Street, again, speed limit is currently 40. We bump it down to 30, very low traffic volume, and it's a neighborhood bikeway, so shared streets. So these are becoming more and more popular. They're trying to reduce the amount of infrastructure that are required for these types of bike lanes.
Is it okay to ask questions?
Of course, yeah.
So I think in Vancouver, they have a lot of these neighborhood bikeways going east to west, as far as I remember. And they're really, really popular, right?
There's quite a few of them, yes. Yeah.
Traversing, so people can get across town to like UBC and back and forth, but it's all through the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And with lots of traffic calming.
Yeah, you'll see traffic circles. Sometimes they dead end roads. It depends on the context, but yeah, and the fact that we have a very tight grid in Nelson, what we call neighborhood bikeways can work really well here. Yeah. So in terms of the inclusiveness part, so mobility for all ages and ability, right now, we're roughly at 5% in terms of the amount of people commuting by bike. So we're really catering to the strong and fearless, and that's a population that will bike regardless of what kind of infrastructure we have. But really what we're trying to do with this project is find this missing link. So understanding that there's anywhere between 30 and 40% of the population that will never cycle, and that's completely fine. But there is another 30 to 40% that is interested, but concerned. Some of them are confident, but would like to see a bit more in infrastructure. So really that's what it's all about, is trying to find that middle ground. So we're not necessarily designing this for the strong and fearless that are already cycling. It's really about how do we get others on their bikes that have a bike, that are liking it, they use it for recreational purposes, but how do we make them make the jump to really use it for commuting? So essentially, we're looking at 3 pieces. The 3rd Street Bikeway is really, as I mentioned, low volume, low traffic speed. We don't need to do much. It's more of a labeling exercise here, I think. But through this process, we have an opportunity to really enhance the sidewalks. Currently, the sidewalks don't have any drop downs on them, meaning they're not really user friendly for all the population. So through this project, we could fix that, and we could also add some curb extensions, which shorten the crossing for pedestrians, and also provides a narrower intersection for, again, traffic calming for vehicles, so reduces speed. In terms of the
Question, just in
yeah.
terms of that pedestrian walkway, I guess.
Yeah.
I think one of the principles there was attractive and intuitive, or I think that was the words that were used, and I don't think we've gone fully there in terms of the the walk routes that we're really targeting for people to use, around lighting, around benches, around trees, etc. So I think, one of the, and I had a bit of this discussion with the mayor that, like, how do you change people habits? I normally walk down this street or that street or whatever, and I think some of those other pieces, like good pedestrian, whatever, level lighting that makes that, tells you this is the street you want to walk on. So I think we probably have more work to do on the pedestrian ones. We'll make the, the sidewalk cuts that will help some people, but if I'm able-bodied and this street looks like the 10 other streets that I could walk down with the lighting and all those things, then I may not go there. But if I know the lighting is good and it's winter and dark, then I'll start to change my habits to walk on that street, or it has good shade trees, or it has benches. So I think there's some more work we'll do with these primary walking corridors that we need to do that. I did some walking this winter in Uphill and Stanley Street, which we encourage people to go on. Was terrible to walk on. It was dark. You couldn't see it. It was icy. It was not a pedestrian-friendly street, and we need to do some more work on those, that that you can actually see where you're putting your feet, if there's ice or not ice. In fact, Stanley, actually my experience was, I think we're plowing the wrong side of the street.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because it's not shade. We're plowing the shade side of the street, and actually this side of the street where the water runs in to make it all icy. And I saw we replaced some sidewalk on the side of the south-northeast side of the street.
The east side, yeah.
Yes, the east side of the street, which seems to me probably the east side gets more sun, late sun, and is, that's the side we didn't plow. It was the safer side to walk, just from the the residents cleaning that. So we have some work to do on that to really signal that these are, these are the streets you can walk on. We do all these things on these streets. So this is part of the plan. You've got more work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the grant funding opportunities, it's a good opportunity to really take advantage of that. In terms of High Street, again, we all know it's a very challenging street. I mean, it's got varying widths. It goes from a fairly wide road to a very narrow road. It's got some blind hills. It's got some tight corners. So, and currently, the speed limit is at 30, but doing some traffic counts on that road, I would like to, guess that they're traveling, vehicles in general are traveling faster than 30. So that being said, one option is to go the route with a protected bike lane. But if we do that, then because we don't have enough width, we have to go to a one-way. The other option is to try to reduce traffic volume and speed via different options. So adding speed bumps, adding color to it, adding signage, adding gateway treatments, so vehicles can still travel in both directions. It is a shared street, but we're really focusing on reducing speed and reducing volumes. And so that's the other option for High Street. And then those two sections are connected via a very challenging intersection. And again, having spent a day at the school site, doing vehicle counts, I got a very good appreciation for how busy and hectic it gets, and what kind of crazy maneuvers are happening at that intersection during those peak times. And at the same time, there's school start and school end. There's 50 kids trying to cross. So there's some really potential dangerous elements to that intersection. So the proposal is to really fix that by either doing a permanent closure or full closure, and really prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists to do that intersection. So in terms of
Yeah,
what,
Sebastian, that
yeah,
really is trying to make that a neighborhood street as opposed to a commuter street. Right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so Janice has, Councillor Morrison, go ahead.
So can I just ask, before we get too far in there, if staff could just go back, and I'm just wondering why I see in the report talking about High Street that the recommendation has been to maintain the two-way traffic, and I'd just like to know kind of how you ended up landing there. I mean, because I was at the meeting, I've looked at the Dotocracy. I've actually ridden that road multiple times on a bicycle, and I'm just wondering, as much as this won't make my friends who own cars happy, why we are looking at not going to the protected lane and just one-way traffic.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and staff has wrestled with the two options quite a bit, and there's pros and cons in both of them. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, we felt that we're confident that we can provide a safe atmosphere for all users here. At the same time, with the least amount of change to the overall transportation network. And at the same time, the idea is that the shared facility will also help conditioning all users in how to share a street, because ultimately the one-way and protected bike lane, eventually you have to get to it, and once you get out of it, then you are forced to share the street in the short term, at least, while we figure out the network. So I think it's a good learning exercise, and a shared street is still, at the end of the day, if we do it right and we are able to reduce the volumes and the speeds, it's still considered one of the triple A, so for all abilities and all ages and abilities. So we think it's a good step in the right direction. As much as I don't like to admit it, with the one-way option, there's still a lot of unknowns. Which way is the best way? Snow clearing. Also, if there's other unintended consequences to this that we don't foresee, then it could potentially be perceived as a failure by many, by not having maybe very high traffic on the cycling side of things, but by creating inconvenience to the other users. So I think ultimately we're kind of moving in that direction in a way that is absolutely safe. Not perfect, but I'm confident it's in the right direction, and we limit unintended consequences. And if after 4 or 5 years it's going very well, I think that would be a good time to maybe bump it up to something else if the traffic or if the volumes require it.
Okay, Councillor Woodward has a question for you.
About the Anderson intersection. So I
Yes.
drop my son off there. Well, I did drop my son off there every day. Sadly, I don't anymore. But when that all goes ahead again, I always found that portion of the street really hectic, as you were saying. And I think this actually would be a big improvement, and it's saying you're one way, right?
Yeah, correct.
Coming out.
Yeah.
I think that just for the general safety of that whole area with all the students, I think that would be, and I was going there every single day. I think that would be really an excellent maneuver. Having it as a bike path is great, but also just having it as a safety measure for all the kids coming and going.
Yeah, and I've met with the teachers at the school, and we've talked about this, and you know they realize that it's a very challenging area, mixing teacher parking and parent drop-offs, and also the residents there, and I did talk to the residents living behind the school, and yeah, they seem to think this is an improvement, and I've been in continuous conversation with the principal at the Hume School, and we're going to continue working together to make this area just safer. And you know, the ultimate goal is to reduce parent drop-offs and hopefully get more kids to walk and cycle to school. So you know that will take some time, but these are the pieces of the puzzle that need to be put in place right now so that we can eventually move to that.
And just independent of that, you know, prior to this initiative, you know, with Highway 3A being paved, we were already in discussions with MOTI to make changes there to deal with that current issue. So, you know, this definitely builds on that, and I'm not even sure if Sebastian was aware of that, but we were already, MOTI had definitely identified it as pretty problematic, and we had as well, and we were gonna, you know, we were working with them on changes anyway. So this goes hand in hand with what was already being planned.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, continue on. So in terms of some of the consultation we've done, we've started out with a thought exchange, and it was we had a lot of participation. Almost 200 people participated, and I was just able to quickly group some of the major themes, and the top three were really about we need infrastructure for people on bikes and connectivity, and the bridge was also, the Big Orange Bridge was also a point of that came up often, and council know that we don't really, that's not ours, it's MOTI's, but they are currently doing a study on exploring options for active transportation. So I've been told that we should be getting some results from that study fairly soon, so hopeful that it could all be well linked together. So in terms of the open house, which we held in early March, we did have a very good turnout. I think we sent out more than 400 letters to residents that are located along those proposed corridors. Did some newspaper ads and some social media posts. So we had a sign-in sheet. So we had 82 confirmed that signed in, but I would say that we were closer to 100 and 150. As staff, we were definitely a little overwhelmed in terms of everybody kind of showed up within the first 10 minutes. So it was a little difficult. I mean, usually we have the opposite, is nobody shows up to these things. So I think that was a positive thing. And ultimately we had a lot of panels, a lot of visuals, and we were really hoping that we could explain the project to the residents and to anyone in the community that was interested in knowing a bit more. And Councillor Morrison alluded to this Dotmocracy panel that we had, and we were just kind of trying to gauge the overall thoughts on our proposals. And indeed, the High Street One Way had a lot of people saying that they liked it. It also did have the opposite. It was a very dividing one. Some of the I don't like it. The shared street was not as popular, but I think part of it, the shared street, is you need to look at it as an overall context. It's not, we're going to leave it as it is today. And ultimately, the 3rd Street neighborhood bikeway seemed to be very popular. There's a bit of confusion. I think some of the residents thought that we were removing parking along the street. We are not. Parking is actually good. It constricts the roadway and keeps vehicle speeds down. So I think potentially some of those not liking it were thinking of that. So ultimately, our recommendation for High Street at this point in time would be to go with a shared street concept, which would again include pavement markings, some gateway features. What I mean with a gateway feature is that the entrance of this corridor, we would have either a lot of green paint, a bit more signage, some sort of a constriction there to really say, okay, if you're driving you know that you're going into a segment of the road that is different. So it's kind of an educational piece to that. So all of that can be achieved, and while still maintaining two-way traffic. We would continue monitoring this, work with different departments on potentially looking at more enforcement in terms of speeding vehicles, things like that. But we feel that it could become, like Kevin alluded to, more of a local street instead of a commuter street. Yes.
So Woodward.
Thank you. Can I ask, do you have on hand, do you have the number of cars that travel High Street on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I did some traffic counts, and I used some peak travel times, and we extrapolate from that, and we're estimating somewhere around 2,000 vehicles per day.
Going both directions?
Both directions, yeah. And they're not necessarily going from one end to the other. Many people that are, from what I could observe, many vehicles traveling, let's say, out of downtowns towards the bridge will cut on Willow Street, and others will cut down on 2nd Street, and then there's a bit of a mix there. But yeah, roughly 2,000 vehicles per day.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Sebastian, you had some help though from the West Kootenay Cycling Club as well in your work, as far as getting to this point. And
Yeah.
Councillor Anderson chaired that group, right? That working
Yeah.
group.
So in terms of the consultation and also the working group, the West Kootenay Cycling Coalition was part of the original working group that worked on the overall review of the active transportation plan. They weren't part of this design exercise, though, no more than council or members of the public. They were definitely informed of all the events. Yeah.
Councillor Renwick has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Sebastian, 2,000 cars a day. When did you do that count? What time of the year? Are we taking into account seasonality for traffic from the tourist park, etc.?
No, it wasn't during the tourist park. It was, I believe, it was in November. It was on November 28th.
So 2,000 could be a little more come summertime.
Yeah, but then you don't have the school traffic, so it could very well be lower as well. And on November 28th, even though there was quite a few pedestrians, there was not a lot of cyclists. It wasn't the nicest day. So I think the cyclists would probably be a little higher during that time. So, I mean, again, we don't have a lot of traffic data, but we could continue monitoring it. But I would suspect that, the campground is approximately 30 sites, maybe a bit more. But I think the biggest influencer here would probably be in the mornings and afternoon anyway, the school.
Follow up?
Yes, absolutely.
And getting back to the intersection at Nelson Avenue and Anderson Street, so essentially that's, for the best part, that's blocked off. So if Cal's driving his car from downtown and I want to get onto Nelson Avenue, I then have to make the left down onto 2nd and then onto Anderson and then onto Nelson Avenue, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
And if it makes you feel any better, they were all Toyotas at 2,000 vehicles on High Street.
Of course they were.
Is there any further questions from council? Okay, so hearing none, there's number 1, that council approves the following design option for the City of Nelson's High Street 3rd Street Cycling Infrastructure Conceptual Design Report dated February the 11th. High Street Corridor, option 2, two-way motor vehicle travel.
I'd like to move a different motion if I could, please, Mayor.
Okay,
I'd like to move option 1, so the language is the same. It's just changing the number from 2 to 1. Moved option 1.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further questions or comments?
Wait.
Just so we're clear now on option 1. That council approves the following design option for the City of Nelson High Street and 3rd Street Recycling Infrastructure Conceptual Design Report dated February 11th, 2020. Is that what you're moving, Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, correct.
And,
Wait,
no,
I think we need clarification on it, on A, option 1 versus B, option 1 versus C, option 1. Because
Hold on.
there's,
bring that back up.
Wait, Gabriel wants to jump in here.
Keith's question is exactly what my question was.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear you, Keith. I beg your pardon. Councillor Page, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying simply that option 1 is referenced in A, B, and C, and it refers to 3 different things. So we'll need some clarity on, I believe Councillor Anderson is talking about option 1 for item A, High Street Corridor,
Correct.
which would be the one-way option with a 2-way bike lane.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And you had a seconder for that?
Yeah, I second.
Councillor Lachtenberg? Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Where are we?
So we've got Councillor Renwick and Councillor Morrison as opposed,
And myself.
and the mayor opposed the motion.
Who voted for it?
Councillor Morrison, you're there? Yeah. So Councillor Page, Anderson, and Councillor Woodward voted for.
And Lochtenberg.
So it carries.
Okay, carries. So we need not go any further here, right?
There's another step.
The list number 2. So are we going to pass number 2 as well? Are you suggesting?
I believe that's still on the table.
Yeah, that council directs staff to hold off on the detailed design work and the implementation of the design options as described above until the results of the BC Act of Transportation grant application are received.
Although I did sign this, it's not in your financial plan, so you have really no authority unless you amend that financial plan to carry out this work. It's all dependent on the grant, right?
Grant's in.
Pardon? We received the grant?
No, we have that in though.
Yeah, but we
If we get the
don't
grant.
get the grant, we don't,
Yes, that's
can't,
correct. Well, that's the way it always works.
right, we can't proceed. right?
Okay, I just wanted to specify that
Yeah, until.
we're not going to move forward spending more money on detailed design until we have the grant. If we don't have the grant, then we might be able to do some alternative things that would be less costly in the meantime and reapply for the grant next year.
So that
Thank-
would,
thank-
that would come back to council. You'd either have to amend the financial plan, which is, it's only funded if you get that grant at this stage.
That's clear.
Okay. And number 2, that council directs staff to hold off on the detailed design work and implementation of the design options as described above until the results of the BC Act of Transportation grant application are received.
I'm just saying we don't need to do that. We can't because you're not
Well,
allowed
well,
under
you're
your
saying we
financial
shouldn't
plan.
do that?
You can't until the grant comes.
Okay, so
Anyway,
Oh,
the recommendation, we take that one off the table and we just
that's
stick with
really
the
more information.
first one. Do you have a
Can I-
question, Councillor Page, or?
Yeah, I have a question or a comment. In anticipation of the grant, or not actually, in preparation for the grant, would it make sense to run a short pilot and provide the grant application a bit more detail and weight, but also it would give us a little bit more insight on if this 2-way approach will really work, or how it will work. So I can imagine running a bike week that's announced where it's marked off, and then you sort of run it for the week and see what the impact of that is.
As a protected bike lane, is that what you're suggesting?
Oh, no, he's talking about the 2-way system. Is that right,
I'm
Councillor Lochinvar?
Yeah, well, I would start off primarily with how the one-way works, because we don't know, as Sebastian said, which direction would it go. We don't know. And then so you try that first,
see even on the side, which side makes more sense is on the left side or the right side. And then if that just isn't working, then we have more information to say, well, maybe we have to go to the other option and do it as a shared lane because we just couldn't make it work. It seems to me it might work to pilot this rather than just invest entirely in a solution that may have unintended consequences, as Sebastian said.
The challenge with that is you confuse the public of which is the right direction to go in these things, and that creates really dangerous situations on our streets. You're mixing, yeah, if 1 week you're saying you drive this way and the next week you say you drive that way, it's hard to change even, you know, where a stop sign is or isn't. We put up lots of signage. It takes a while to do that. I agree with the concept. We can go back to our safety folks, our police and public works, but that's what I hear from them is, you know, trying to make those changes and flipping them, might change. And someone gets injured, we get sued.
Okay, so it's not something, what you're saying is it's not something.
Okay. We can go back and ask. I think that's what you're gonna hear is that would be really challenging to do practically. I agree 100%. I'd love to do that, but I think you'd have to pick a route and change it for a period of time, or it would become pretty dangerous, especially if we're not doing anything around that intersection.
Right, and there's one to do the bollards where you could pilot it for a month and then see how it works.
I think we would probably select the preferred route and try it and see how that works. And I don't think flipping it the next month is probably wise, but we can ask our police and public works.
You might want to ask the community as well.
It's really difficult changing people's habits, and especially when you're mixing pedestrians and cyclists and starting to flip those in students and kids and that, we can ask.
I hear you, and I think that the habit thing is the key part of this. And so
one of the things that is worth keeping in mind going forward is, based on the recommendation tonight, it's not that easy to implement that idea throughout the rest of the municipality. You're going to create expectations then that separated bike paths will be the option going into like Rosemont or Uphill, and you got to keep in mind that cyclists have to get to those bike paths on two-way traffic with streets with two-way traffic. So
yeah,
you're adding a lot of cost to doing that. And I think if you start playing around with it on High Street, I really think you need to have that conversation with the community, because that's what we went out to them with before, and the staff came back with the recommendation they did tonight. And if we're going to have a flip-flop of one-way traffic down there, we might want to have a conversation with the people.
My question though is related to, you know, we heard from the community that they prefer the separated bike lanes, and now we're into how is this going to work without the unintended consequences that often come from a decision like this. And it just seems to me that if we could for some period of time try out, you know, the separated bike lane on one side of the street, separated from the other, traffic go one way versus the other, you're gonna, you know, as far as the bike lane itself, the lane goes, for sure, having a separated bike lane is a powerful cue. It's definitely something that is much safer. I've ridden in all kinds of this in Vancouver, and I know even for a stretch of for a road like High Street that is dangerous, having that separated bike lane is it's gonna draw a lot of people onto the lane, onto the bikes. So, anyways, thanks for the.
We can talk to our staff about you may want to. I don't know. We can look at what's practical to pilot and what's not. You may want to pilot the two-way by blocking that intersection and see what traffic volumes you get. or you're gonna select one way or the other. And, you know, basically if it fails, you select what we think is the preferred route. If that fails, then I guess you say, oops, well, you know, when we do the separated bike lane, we'll do it the other way.
Councillor Anderson?
So one thing I just want to point out is that doing any type of pilot during a pandemic will likely not get a true sense of what this is actually going to look like. You know, I think without kids being in school and people, you know, traveling to go to work every day, that we, you know, I would just be careful. Hopefully we're going to come out of this soon, but, you know, if we were to implement something shortly after the pandemic, we would likely not get an accurate representation of what happens in a normal scenario.
Although the flip side is you might have less traffic volume, so you might have less conflict and get more people, might be less risky doing it with less traffic to start with and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't work under that scenario, then with the traffic volumes higher, then it definitely probably won't work.
And hearing what I'm hearing is that we can be mindful in terms of the design, the technical design, in terms of making sure that we're not pouring concrete. We're using materials that can be moved. So, but I think to pilot something, it's usually you got to pilot it for a whole season so that people get a chance to get used to it. If not, it's going to be very disruptive, and we might get more negative feedback than what we actually want. But that being said, I mean, if we use flexible ballers that are screwed into the pavement, those can be removed, and let's say we want to put them on the other side of the road the next year to gauge that, like that would be doable. So I think you know, I'm hearing the message, and we can be mindful in the actual detailed design in terms of ensuring that things are safe, but maybe not as permanent, so they can be adjusted as needed.
Councillor Woodward?
Thank you. I just from a personal perspective, I rode High Street. I lived on up on High Street when the really steep part that goes up, and I rode into town every day to work for years. And that High Street, if you're not one of that category of
fearless,
it's like there's a lot of tight corners, a lot of blind pieces that I think. That's why I feel like the protected bike lane is really the way to gather in people who just don't have that kind of like that fearless nature, and like you were saying, and I think that's what's really important. And you see it like in other cities, those protected bike lanes really are very inviting for people to, especially like, you know, young families with kids. They can ride on those protected bikeways and feel that safety that they wouldn't get on the blind corners. And you can't see over the hill, so that's just wanted to say that.
Thanks very much. So we've already had the vote. We're moving on to the next item agenda on the agenda. So thanks very much.
Yep. Thank you,
Pamela and Sebastian, for helping us out. The next one is ratify the extension request for the Music Festival Association.
Yeah.
This seems fairly simple.
I'll move that.
Councillor Woodward.
So the only comment I would make, that money could be used in our community now, not in 2022, and they could always reapply in another year. Now you've already gone back, and this one might be a little late. I'm just, you know, you might want to just go ahead with this one, but the ones that are coming up, if people delay them for 2 years, let them apply in another year. This money could be $3,000 more to an artist or something tomorrow instead of 3 years from now, or 2 years from now. So that would be the only lens that I think going forward. I think you've made a bit of decision on this one already. So I think, you know, to be fair, you know, going ahead with it. But in the new CIP,
well, I mean, there's a recommendation here. It doesn't mean you have to approve it. So we haven't had a mover and a seconder yet. So based on what Kevin's saying, Jesse,
I'll move it.
You'll move it as is?
I'm moving it as is.
Okay. Seconded by Keith. Any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment as a mover?
Yeah.
I just want to recognize what the CAO is saying, and I do feel kind of like this has already been recommended, but I do understand what you're saying, so thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Good, thank you very much. All right, so we have minutes and reports coming up next. We have the Library Cultural Development Committee. Anyone want to move receipt, or is there something you want to mention in there?
I'll move.
Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Morrison, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. Reports, financial, building permit stats, no sign of the rusty moose in there. Moved by Councillor Renwick. Second by Councillor Lochtenberg, all in favour?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hang on.
Sorry.
A question from Councillor Woodward.
Brittany, did you want to ask a question?
Mine's petty, so you can go first.
Okay. I was just curious, have we seen contraction as of yet for building permits?
Last year building.
Yeah, they just left.
They're saying it's
I looked through this.
fairly busy.
It seems
A
fairly,
lot of this we had, right?
Right.
fairly steady, but
So we're not, we're not, maybe not yet.
They're not in panic stage yet. There's
Right.
still people are inquired. The flip side of COVID is people are home and looking to invest in their property. The building supply stores are busier than ever, and you know, I don't know if we're gonna get the larger projects,
Right.
like the one on Victoria. Whether that goes, you know, those private ones are probably the ones more at risk. You know, the project in the Vernon Street there in the hole, that one probably at risk. You know,
Right.
Kootenai Landing, Nelson Landing, all those are probably likely at risk. More fortunate that we have these public sector funded projects, and as you know from the economic stimulus plan, our goal is to, you know, try to push more of those out the door. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
okay so far.
Great.
thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Lochtenberg.
So just I just noticed again, you know, they're not large purchases, but just several purchases from Amazon, and I think now more than ever we really want to be keeping the dollars in our community at every possible opportunity. So I'd really ask that if we could avoid shopping online in particular, but shopping online in general, but shopping from Amazon in particular. I would just really like to see that money going into our community and into our businesses as much as possible. And I really feel like every dollar does count at this point. And then my second just question was CP Rail. What do I know there's 3 charges on there. I was just curious what we pay them for.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. So I'll address your first one on Amazon. We certainly find that there are certain things we just cannot get. We find that our mechanics actually use it quite a bit, where they cannot get a part here locally, but they can search online and get it through Amazon and get it here delivered here. So that's one of the pieces that we see from Amazon. So certainly we always have the idea of keeping our dollars local, keeping those round dollars for sure. But definitely there are situations where Amazon is a choice that we need to use at times. The second one, CP, we have a number of leases with them, and we have arrangements with them as far as crossings that we need to pay.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
That's a good question, but if you look at the list, it's quite extensive, and the bulk of our purchases are local. So Councillor Lochtenberg, go ahead.
This is probably a question for Colin. We have a sense of what the falling dollar typically does to financial outlook and maybe building outlook over, say, a year, 2 year period.
It's a little hard. Sorry, Councillor Lochtenberg, it's hard to hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. For the CFO, do you have generally a read on when the dollar falls, what it does to the city finances, and not just the corporation, but the city in general? What does that do to say to the building?
Sorry, Councillor, getting part of it. Are you talking about our dollar falling?
I think we can answer on our operations. We're not economists, so it's hard for us to determine that on other organizations.
We don't have a lot of purchases that would be involved with having the dollar, like our dollar in effect. It does have a concern for us on things like the fire truck, where some of those purchases would be coming out of the U.S. So we're not in that right now, but it's certainly one of the reasons that the fire chief was looking at hey, is there a reason maybe for us to hold off and look at that, not only for what we were doing in our 25-point action plan, but just overall as far as other municipalities that may not be able to afford vehicles and what happens in that particular chain, but also just in the hopes that that as hopefully as we move out of this COVID pandemic, that our economy improves and that our dollar will improve. But like I said, most cases, that's not really an issue with us on the dollar side.
And you did some hedging, didn't you, at some point?
I have some hedging for not quite half, or at least at the time it was half of we have some American dollars. So again, it'll be somewhat helpful for a fire truck, but at the end of the day, we'll see when we go through the process of RFP what comes out.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Luxembourg? Good, thanks. You got a helper there, I see. And the next one, did we move receipt of those reports?
We did.
We did?
Yes.
Okay. Next one is correspondence, and if there's anything you want to touch on there, you're welcome to. Otherwise, move receipt.
Move receipt.
And Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Luxembourg. All in favour? Carried. And there's no late items.
Mr. Mayor, the only one is, we were informed Councillor Anderson has an interview with CBC Radio tomorrow on the Cottonwood Market. So just in light of that decision at council, should have some conversation about that.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying.
Councillor Anderson has an interview with CBC Radio tomorrow on the
Yeah.
Cottonwood Markets.
Yeah.
So just in light of the decision made by council,
Yeah.
normally the mayor speaks on council decisions.
Yeah. Councillor Anderson, do you have an interview in the morning, or were you contacted?
Yeah, I was contacted for an interview. I did see that staff I actually provided the interviewer with Sarah Witten's contact information so that she got that information. I think they were also requesting information from her. And so I saw that there was a response that, the mayor should be the spokesperson, and I do understand that, but that also we need to run it by council and staff anytime that we're interviewed. And so I just question, after most of our city council meetings, our local news reporters do come up to us and ask questions. And so, and often I'll get a phone call or an email from a local reporter, and I do tend to want to respond to them. And so I'm just curious if staff is asking that council does not speak to the media, that we always go through the mayor.
I think it's, different after a council meeting. The media was here, heard the debate, and might want to ask a question on why you voted in favor of something or not. I think in these cases where they're asking you, they were there for writing a story on whatever decision council made. Unfortunately, they're not here to be able to do that. So it's not if council makes a decision and they're asking someone that voted against it why you voted against it, or someone that voted for it why you voted for it. It's now someone has to speak on behalf of council because they're not here to hear that or hear your debate about it. I think that's the item. So if you speak individually without anybody on council speaking to that, you certainly can speak to, well, again, normally the mayor would speak to the decision of council. And in this case, basically all you would say is council decided to refer this back to staff to have further discussions with the EcoSociety about the markets this year. And normally that would be the mayor. If a decision had been made and that was, the city put out a media release and you voted against that and they asked you why you voted against it, that would be fair game. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, as long as media is in the room during our council debate, I'm allowed to speak to them. If media is not in the room during the council debate, then we always just put it up to the mayor. Is that correct?
Well, generally it should go to the mayor anyway, because that's the spokesperson for council.
And I think what what we're asking, Brittany, is that you give us a heads up again. Just let the mayor know or let Kevin know that there's been a request to speak to the media when it's outside of a regular council meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
so
we need the context of council. Otherwise, you're speaking for council. If you speak to them tomorrow, because nobody else has spoken to council, right? That's the challenge in this kind of environment.
right, but I mean, often, you know, we still will get, there'll be one person that grabs one of us, you know, Rick said something really interesting, or, you know, Cal said something that was in support of this, and they do want to get, you know, a quote or a soundbite. And so, you know, I think I'm totally comfortable with informing staff, and council, but, you know, I just think that we have to consider that this actually happens quite a bit more frequently, you know, than just sort of a one-off. And so, you know, we're frequently contacted about all sorts of different things. You know, I was contacted by Bill Metcalf about active transportation. You know, we've talked about a lot of different things, and so I understand that this, you know, this might be a bit of a, you know, assumed to be a hot topic, but you know, I think that it's just I hear what you're saying. It's just very interesting.
Well, may I?
Yeah.
I mean, people gravitate towards people on council for an opinion, as you know, which is natural.
Yep.
And I feel like, you know, part of being a counselor is having those lines of communications open so that people can feel comfortable to come and approach a counselor and say, what do you think of this? And as Brittany said, or as Councillor Anderson said, you know, the local media does it all the time.
After a council decision, though, right?
Well, not necessarily, because they might want to be like, I'm writing a story on this subject matter. I'm wondering, you know, what a counselor might think about it. And so they would phone up a counselor and say, what do you think about this new building going in? Or what do you think about, you know, this change of direction for the city? Or, I mean, are we...
I think Councillor Morris has spoken to this once before when it comes to speaking about the royal we in terms of what council has decided. Like, once council has gone forward with a decision, it's kind of up to us. We may have disagreement, but it's not for us to be out there with different opinions so much at that point. There is a royal we in that sense. Like, as much as we may want to express why we thought a certain thing or went down a certain path, like, once council has weighed in, that decision is kind of over and finished, and it's kind of it has happened. There has to be a certain respect for that, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think you put the spokesman of the mayor up there, is to speak to what council had decided instead of having individuals riffing off of it. So I kind of see both sides of this. I'm not sure where it eventually ends up landing, but I think informing at the very least. In certain cases, you know, we're sitting as chair of different committees and might have, you know, a different reason to be the person or the spokesperson to that issue. But overarching, you know, it cuts both ways. As much as we wouldn't want individuals naysaying a decision that happened at a table that didn't go a particular way, we also want to make sure that the mayor is speaking to the opinion of council as opposed to his own.
That's my job.
Yeah, up to you for that.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
I guess in this particular case, council really has referred this to staff to do some more work, and I think that's the will of council. And you know, you don't want to kind of, you know, you just want that message clear. And if that's the intent, it's up to you and the mayor to sort that one out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would certainly not, you know, we've made a clear decision tonight that it's referred back to staff, and that, I mean, that is our decision. There's no other decision that was made around the table. You know, we did have some discussions in camera, but around the table, there was a very clear decision. And so, you know, I trust it will go back to staff, and the EcoSociety and staff will talk, and I hope that we can come up with a resolution that's good for businesses, that people are able to get their fresh veggies, that are good for everybody. So, you know, that was always my intent. I don't think I've ever been quoted in the media completely disagreeing with, or trying to throw council under the bus. I think that I have acted with the royal we, and so I'll provide the mayor with the information, and he can go on CBC tomorrow and talk about it. It's just after 30.
Thank you. Call a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind our public and our councilors, make sure they get their favorite pop and chips and candy, because we've got the budget presentation being streamed live on Wednesday, May 6th at 7 p.m. So, I'm just giving it free warning out there. Make sure everyone's got their comfy.
Netflix?
No, it's not going to be on Netflix. We're streaming it. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to supersede Netflix. But I think it'll be a great opportunity for us to speak about the 25-point action plan and just really get in front of that and allow the public to be aware of what's happening.
Thanks very much.
That's great.
Thanks. And special thanks to Sarah,
Yes.
Gabriel, Kevin, Colin for being here tonight, and the rest of our staff. I'd like a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Page. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone.
The end.